So when your average BattleTech fan starts thinking about the anime roots of BattleTech, the first thing a lot of them are going to think of is Macross, which or Robotech, as it's known, which is a great show. It
Mm-hmm.
is. It is a great show in the context of mecha anime, but they're also going to think of a lot of things like Gundam. A lot of people these days wouldn't have watched the original Mobile Suit Gundam. They might have watched some of the later ones. Gundam Wing would have been a lot of our first introduction to like mecha anime. And if you get into the genre, you realize very quickly that it's silly. It's very silly. You're like, it's about big robots in space, though. And it's like, yeah, but half the time the robots are magical and the like the main character is the son of the guy who designed it, and his blood unlocks a special power in the robot or something. It's almost unwatchable. It makes more sense if you're versed in the culture of the type of anime that it is. If you watch other things like, I hate to say it, but you watch like magical girl anime, it's going to make a lot more sense
Mm.
because it's all, these genre blending things. Particularly in mecha anime, you run into asinine tropes, thousands and thousands of enemies fighting one hero, and the hero just kind of waves his hand and they explode in huge groups. And it's like, yeah, this is cute and all, but I'm like into warfare. And this is more superhero fantasy. And a lot of the time it is. Fang of the Sun Dugrum is one of the most surprisingly grounded pieces of military fiction in the history of mecha anime. And it can be hard to get into because it was made in 1981. It was the visual designer. Every time I post pictures of the Blockhead, the Wolverine,
Mm.
someone always, oh, it looks like a Zaku. Everyone knows the Zaku. Everybody loves the Zaku. It's a great looking mobile suit from Gundam. What they may not realize is because it's the same guy designed them like 2 years apart.
Mm.
1979, he did Mobile Suit Gundam. 1981, he did Fang of the Sun Dugrum. It's like same dude designed all of these mobile suits. And the writer-director is really what brought that one together for me, though, because what you won't find in Dugrum is the main combat armor, they're called in that. He won't fight 30 enemies at a time. You'll have a very grounded setup for the episode that's like, we have to make it through this valley. This valley is full of mines. We need to use the combat armor to spot and destroy the mines so we can get through it. On the other end of the valley, the enemy has deployed 2 blockhead combat armors. They're dangerous because they're physically larger than us and have heavier weapons, but because of the environment that we're in, they move a little bit slower. Okay, there's the episode, go. Or we need to get through this pass. There is a hardened anti-combat armor rifle at the top. There is a bunker at the bottom. The infantry will assault this way. The Dugrum combat armor will flank from, like, it's so grounded and so pleasing for nerds like me who really get into detailed military fiction. It deals with logistics. It deals with politics. It deals with, in an interesting way, the loss of innocence. Okay. In a way that I honestly didn't expect. And if you just start the show, there's 2 characters, Kryn and Daisy, who you're going to be like, oh, God, they're just, oh, yeah, the child in the combat armor, and he's better than everybody, and oh, the girl who loves him, and they're going to meet up halfway. But it's like that storyline goes in a direction you just would never expect. Because the storyline ultimately is about how they think of one another when they're apart, and then they come together and they realize that war has changed them into profoundly different people. And it's strangely touching. And it has an ending on it. It's a 75 episode run. It is all available on YouTube. I really advise people go watch it. The ending of it is so bittersweet, and they kind of tell you that it's coming in the first episode before you get to it, because the show opens with that shot I'm sure everyone has seen. I've made a model of it, which is the Dugrum mech, the combat armor, slumped over, sitting on its butt with its feet kind of splayed in front of it, one arm leaned over one of its elbows, and its head slumped forward, like obviously battered, broken, bruised, and abandoned in the desert, blasted by sand and just utterly derelict. The show opens with that. And then a character stumbles upon it in the desert, and then they remember. They're like, oh, that's right, we fought this rebellion. How did it come to this? And that's where the show kind of starts. And it's I'm gonna put it this way. You could take the plot of Fang of the Sun Dugrum and you could set it in the periphery of BattleTech post Fourth Succession War, change a couple names around, change nothing else. That's it. It would just fit. And it's kind of why those are some of my favorite stories and settings in 3025. I know a lot of people get really into the grand political schemes of BattleTech. Mm-hmm. Being totally honest, I could not possibly care any less about what the House Davion is up to, what House Steiner is up to, what Operation Bulldog. I'm like, let's talk about this crappy little periphery world, this little agricultural community that's beset by pirates in barely functioning battle mechs, and the rinky-dink little mercenary company with a 250-year-old spider that's going to fight them. Like, this is where that universe lives for me. And the story of Dougram is very much like that. It's very narrow. It's very contained. The hero mech in it, the Dougram, he doesn't have any special powers. He's not even necessarily better than any of the other combat armors, with the notable exception of the fact that the planet Deloyer lay within what they call the X Nebula, which just has a deleterious effect on like sensors and communication systems and reaction times within computers. And the Dougram is shielded against that. That's the only advantage that it has, is that it reacts slightly faster than all the other combat armors do. And that goes away halfway into the series. The enemy shields their combat armors as part of the arms race subplot, and then the Dougram's just like, well, I guess I'm average now. It's an incredibly pleasing story, and if you care about things like the real world, because okay, mechs are, let's just get this out of the way, mechs are stupid. They make no sense at all. Like, if we say in the real world, when is the military going to build mechs? The answer is never, because it's a terrible idea on every conceivable level, but they're so cool. And I still, even recognizing that they make no sense, I want them to be plausible. I want the writers to care enough about what they're doing that I can feel myself in that world, that I can imagine what it would be like to be next to one, to see one fighting, to be in one. They're this amazing analog for the modern soldier in a world where, long distance missiles and tanks rule the battlefield. That's, I don't know, massive oversimplification, but you get my point. It's this analog for the soldier standing alone. It's the horse under the knight. It's that force multiplier. It's this heroic figure standing astride the field of battle like a god of war, making his presence known. And it just fires my imagination up so much. And I don't know how quite I got to that from talking about Dougram. I guess just because that's what it makes me feel like when I watch it.
Awesome. I love it. That's great sell. I had posted that I was going to try to watch through the series earlier this year. I got through the first 2 episodes before life kind of distracted that goal, but I got to dive in. I got to get through those initial ones and get into the story.
You have to be willing to sift through some silliness.
Yeah.
You do. It is an older anime. It is dated. But if you're willing to put in the time, it's so rewarding in the later storylines. And it definitely suffers from that, like, two people standing in a room having a conversation. Most of the frames are still and their mouths move, but they knew where to spend their money, because then later in the same episode, it's like, okay, here's the part where the Dougram is going to rip the upper half off of a tank. Nice. And it's like they animate the fingers going into the metal and the rivets breaking as it peels the turret off. And you're like, oh yeah, they knew what they wanted to spend their money on. I try to get people to watch it. You know what it is? It's that in the beginning of the show, when they're cruising on their little mech carrier, they start singing that school song about the dog faces the west and the sun rises in the east. And it's like, what the fuck am I watching?
Yeah.
Like, it's so goofy, but you're like, you want to be like, no, look, it's a song that they all sang as children when they were in school. It is a cultural touchstone that they're using to connect to one another in this time of strife. And it's like, you gotta be willing to just buy it and go with it to get to the parts that really hit hard.
Definitely.
But some people aren't, because it is from 1981 and that's a little bit goofy.
Well, you sold me. I'm gonna get myself, set aside some time, dive back into it, over this next month or two, and I'll let you know.
I'll be interested to see what you have to say, because the other complaint people sometimes have is you get towards the end of the show and it's like, oh no, there's like a lot of stuff here about how we can't fight the war, and there's lots of logistical problems, and there's politicians doing politicking and backstabbing, and I'm like, this is kind of how armistices go, though.
It works. Yeah.
Like, it was never going to be as simple as they wanted it to be, and the writers knew that.
Yeah.
Anyway, but like I said, I'll just talk about it all night, so I'm going to stop.